I'm ready.
Alrighty.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
That's that line from Doomsday, isn't it? Oh, I'm
think
ready. And that's when he does the bloody the void stuff scene. Pulling him all in. Nah.
I remember now. I knew we said that sometime.
So, somebody that asks me what they're going to do with the glasses. What are they going to do with the glasses? I can see.
That's what.
Hello there, and welcome to another video on the channel. We are doing a collab video with Maddox, who has been here before.
Hi again, Connor and his audience.
Yes. Yeah, so this is probably the first time on my channel that you haven't been part of an advent calendar. So it's just a regular old vid.
Yeah. We had a snazzy idea, didn't we? Like, yes. I gave you a cool idea and you were like, ooh, yes, let's do that.
Yeah, so
I'll let you present it.
In the Discord server, we have this section for ideas for videos where, like, once every half hour you can write a message in there to give an idea for our video. And doesn't mean that I necessarily will have to do it, like, unlike the Patreon side of it, but I can do it if I want to. And the idea was to highlight the best and worst decision made for each Doctor's era, which I think is a great idea. And I tried to limit it to, you know, you can't just choose one casting choice or one individual episode. You can't say things that don't have to do with the show in University to an extent. You know, there has to be some kind of impact in the universe for it. Unlike, you know, you can't just say, the worst decision of the 60s is wiping missing episodes, you know.
And it also can't be something like, this era, the best decision of this era was hiring Patrick Troughton, was hiring David Tennant. Like, it has to be more deeper than that. It can't be, like, purely actor aesthetics or whatever.
Yes.
Like, something plot relevant.
Yeah, so sort of the criteria, if you can try, is to have it be something that impacts more than one story. That's sort of the idea. To be fair, in some of these I have cut a few corners, but I think I've just made it. I've just made it over the line to find a best and worst for each one. And I think in some instances where it's a bit unsure whether or not it's it counts or not, I have given an alternative answer. So there is, you know, there's backup plans. But yeah. So,
yeah, I have a few as well.
But yeah, we're going to be going
through
each Doctor's era, and we're going to be giving our best and worst decisions made for each. So obviously we'll have to start with William Hartnell, the first Doctor. And,
of course.
I will start with my best. I think we'll start positive for this one. So my best decision for the Hartnell era is keeping the Doctor and Susan's origins a mystery.
Ooh, that is a good one.
Yes, because I feel like if you were to just outright say where they were from straight up, well, obviously we would have never gotten Gallifrey, but also it just wouldn't create that enigma around these two characters like it did. If you just said, you know, at the start of, oh yes, I come from Ireland in the 51st century, and we invented a spaceship out of a police box, like that would just be really weird.
It's funny because in the pilot episode they nearly did do that. Like, there's that line Susan has about being, I was born in the 49th century, and it's like, okay, that's fucking dumb. But then in the broadcast version they keep it mysterious and enigmatic, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, I prefer that, and and what it means is that because we don't actually know, when they do reference it, it's really intriguing. Like, there's that bit in the Sensorites where Susan talks about her home planet. And she talks about, you know, it's like any Gallifrey scene where they're like, talking about like the
leaves on the trees are bright silver.
Yeah. The
sky is a burnt orange.
Yeah,
it's lovely.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we've gotten lots of scenes since then that are like that. You know, like the Time Monster and Gridlock and all that.
Oh yeah, I love those scenes.
Yeah, except it's odd that in the Five Doctors when we actually see it, it's nothing like that's described.
I think it's a grey, dreary, like, war zone, and then, like, in the Invasion of Time, it's just a quarry tinted orange. Like, okay.
Yeah. The first time Gallifrey actually looked great was that flashback in The Sound of Drums. I loved that scene.
I can get down with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it in the war games as well, but it's also like very.
Well, I mean,
it's not as.
That's like inside though.
Yeah. True that.
Yeah.
Do I present mine?
Well, I was just gonna say that for me, that's more about like the setting.
Right. Okay.
But yeah. Well, what's your best choice for the Hartnell era?
My best choice is I've got two, but I'll go with one of them for now. Like the structure of the team, how like you've got this alien distant scientist grandfatherly doctor, these two fresh out of water teachers, one who is more scientific, one who is more empathetic and historian based, and then like you've got this upbeat head in the clouds teenager who's like sort of a bridge between the two, who like the teachers can like get an emotional understanding with the doctor through, and they all have their own parts to play in the story. Like usually they all get split up and like they have their own techniques to aid the supporting characters against certain threats. Like Barbara's a very negotiator type of character. Like she's always the one who will like arrange like with the Menoptera how to do a rebellion, or like and Susan does that as well, but like Susan's more like coming of age in a way, and so is Vicky, and like the Doctor's more science and doddery, and he's not as active as say Ian, who takes on the more action roles, like that caves in the Daleks, where it's a very physical thing. That's my decision for my favorite creative decision for the era. Like these characters all have their part to play in the stories, and it feels just really nice, and can't think of like the perfect word to describe it, but like it feels very functional and very natural that the team operates in this way, and has that dynamic.
My my retrospective and hindsight headcanon around why Susan is better with Ian and Barbara at the start than the Doctor is because I'm pretty sure that Susan isn't a Time Lord. I'm pretty sure in my headcanon Susan is just Gallifreyan but not a Time Lord. And so she's not someone that, she's not from this high society. She doesn't regenerate. She doesn't have any of that like shit. But she's the Doctor's granddaughter from the outside,
Yeah. I know that theory. Yeah. Because at first I thought you meant she's just not Gallifreyan at all. I was like, what? Yeah. But I was like, oh yeah, of course there are Gallifreyans and Time Lords.
I would never want this to be explored because I do want their origins to be kept a mystery. But one story from that in my head, just in my sort of imagination, that comes from that is the fact that Susan is one of the Gallifreyans that isn't a Time Lord that's then brought into that sort of capital area. Like the idea that I had in my head is that there's a sort of tension of, do we allow people that aren't part of our superior race to come into our area? And I feel like that could have made a really interesting sort of almost like racial politics in a way, like for Gallifrey, except rather than about like ethnicity and skin color, it's about like whether or not you are a Time Lord or not, whether you have power. I think
that's an interesting idea, actually. Yeah,
but I think that also like in my head, that's part of why Susan relates more to Ian and Barbara, because she's more grounded in Gallifrey, whereas because the Doctor is wrapped up in being a Time Lord, he's used to being in this like aristocratic sort of superior environment, and despite the fact that he ran away from that, he still carries a lot of that in him, and that's what him coming to Earth for the first time and meeting humans, and then also meeting the Daleks and seeing the opposite end of that really develops his character. So in my headcanon, that kind of works.
I did mention that as my other point, like the slow thawing of his icy demeanor over like his era of the show. Like that's my other favorite creative decision of his era. It kind of links into what I was talking about with like the team structure.
Yes,
it's lovely. Worst decision for Hartnell.
Right.
Do you want to go first?
Well, mine on the surface may seem like it's a bit of a cop-out choice, but actually, this impacts like pretty much a whole season. To some extent, depending on which way you go with it after. but my worst decision in the Hartnell era is axing Vicky when they did.
Right, okay, I can see that. Yeah.
So
it's a terrible ending.
Yeah, so this is something that happened because Maureen O'Brien said, I would like to leave at some point, and then John Wiles took that as, I want to leave now. And so they ended up writing out her character in the Mythmakers in a really out-of-character way. And
apparently Maureen O'Brien didn't even know she was leaving until she got the script.
Yes. So I think this was a really poor move, and not to say that because I do, to some extent, I do think, Katarina is an interesting character, and I love Sarah Kingdom, but I feel like Vicky was so important to the first Doctor that she just overshadows these random people. And I feel there are two ways you could have done about this. You could have had her die in the Daleks Master Plan episode 4 like Katarina did. I feel like that would have been a massive gut punch.
Yeah, I agree. I would have preferred that.
I would have preferred that. But even then, even if you had kept her past that point, that means that not only would she not have that terrible ending in the Mythmakers, but also it means we would have never gotten Dodo either. And so, which is positive, because Dodo is just a really weak character. And to have Vicky carry through season 3 would have actually been, it would have really, because I really like season 3, but I think it would have improved it even more than it already is. I feel like it would have felt more solid and have more of that magic that the rest of the Hartnell era would have had. And just had, like, a whole season of Hartnell, Vicky, and Steven would have been great. And, like, again, there's so many, when I think about all those stories, there's so many things that I would have loved to have seen. Like, I would have loved to have seen Vicky in the Gunfighters. I imagine she would have so much fun with that. And then you got, like, in Dalek's Master Plan, seeing her against, like, Brett Vian, that would have been a really interesting thing to do. And then,
that would have been a cool dynamic.
Yeah, and then seeing her, like, how she would have reacted to the whole situation. I mean, again, like, if you did have her die in the Katarina space, then you could have had her be the one that in Sarah Kingdom's place where she dies at the very end of the story. You could have had that, or you could have had it where Sarah Kingdom dies and Vicky's still there. There's many ways you could have gone about it. The only thing that I would make sure I do is I would make sure that the massacre is late enough in the season to where Vicky's not there anymore and it's only the Doctor and Steven. I think the way I would do it is I would probably have Vicky exit, like, the story before the massacre. So whether that be Dalek's Master Plan and they have it the same structure they do, or I have her exit in one of the other ones that they had. Maybe, could be the Savages, could be the Ark, could be this the Gunfighters, like one of those. And have the massacre take place right after it. And then actually, to be fair, that would mean that Steven's exit would just be him walking out on that. It would be a lot more impactful.
Yeah. That links into my worst message for the Hartnell era, which is the ending of the massacre. Now, I don't mean, like, Steven getting pissed at the Doctor and, like, the Doctor, like, having that self-reflective, impactful moment. That's great. What I mean is Dodo coming in and then Steven coming back. That is terrible. Because it negates all of Steven's character development that he'd been building up throughout the entire Daleks Master Plan, throughout all of the massacre, all of this, like, ill will he'd been building up towards the Doctor, and, like, the adventures they were having, like, how gritty and unwelcoming and unpleasant all these experiences were, and how they were just building and building and building, and then he snaps at him and is like, no, you know what, I'm leaving, bye. And then he just comes back, he's just like, just kind of felt like coming back, really. Yes. And then that never comes up again. And
then there's also the fact that Dodo is fucking annoying, and also her accent in that part of the story is completely different from the Ark.
Yeah, and Dodo's a terrible character.
There's such bizarre subplot in the Ark about the Doctor saying, I'm going to teach you how to speak proper English, but by that point she's already changed her accent. She doesn't sound wrong at all.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Dodo's terrible and she doesn't have a journey. She doesn't have a want that, like, Susan did, that Vicky did. Like, she's just there. And also, it impacts the first Doctor negatively as well, because, like, the massacre, that feels like the last time the first Doctor really has, like, a character beat.
Yeah.
Because starting from, like, the Ark onwards, he's just kind of, his character plateaus and weakens and becomes more
like I said, I would have loved if the massacre took place right before the War Machines. That would have made so much more sense to me, where it's Stephen walking out on him and he's alone in the War Machines, and he meets Ben and Polly there, you know, and like it would be a great beat, because he's so down and so dour that meeting these like really hip modern youngsters would really lighten him up. Imagine, like, it would have been this actually honestly sounds like a Russell T Davies drama, but like right after the massacre, the first thing the Doctor does is go to a fucking bar.
That'd be cool, actually.
And has a drink, and you could like link that up to the gunfighters, where he's like, you know, I don't usually touch the stuff, but I want some alcohol, you know? That could have been really interesting.
Yeah, it is kind of weird how like the First Doctor's era like builds and builds and builds all the way up to like Master Plan and the Massacre, and then it's just this weird like saggy period with like the Celestial Toymaker and the gunfight. I mean, I like the gunfighters, but like still, it just feels really weird how like nothing of consequence really happens in that time, and then the 10th planet. Like,
yeah. I feel like what you should have done is you should have had Master Plan create this like this tension between the Doctor and Steven, and Vicky's there to make sure it doesn't blow over, but then as soon as she leaves, that's when it breaks in the massacre. I feel like that would have been a way better way to do it. For
sure, yeah. But yeah, that's our First Doctor retrospective.
Yes, of course. We went a bit over, but I think it was important. I think there's a lot to dig into there with season 3, because the rest of the First Doctor's era is pretty damn brilliant.
Yeah, I love seasons 1 and 2, but season 3 has issues.
Yeah, it has issues. I still love the individual stories, but not the sort of overall arc. After Massacre, it gets a bit messy. It's basically just Dodo's. Whenever Dodo's in it is where there's problems.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and again, like this would be just fixed if Vicky was there instead.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. All right, let's move on to Daddy Troughton.
The best one.
I think you should start with the best one.
This is like quite an out of left field one, but Victoria, like not just her as a character, but also the situation she creates. Like, because a lot of people do kind of just write off the Second Doctor's era as just, bumbling around the universe with friends, who cares? But there is like some underlying character tension there, and like Victoria's orphan situation that, you know, is put forward in Evil of the Daleks puts the Doctor and Jamie into this sort of like foster father type scenario. And we were talking about this in another stream, how like the Doctor, Jamie, and Victoria all have like different dynamics with each other, because like even though the Doctor and Jamie kind of like feel like a parental couple over her, Jamie also has like this romantic tension with Victoria in a way.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
I just rewatched the Ice Warriors yesterday, and like exactly what you're saying is there's a different dynamic with each one. With like Jamie, it's very it's quite sexual in some ways, but it's also quite romantic. And then with the Doctor, like there's that scene where I think this is about Victoria, is that everyone seems to misunderstand, is that people just write her off as a damsel in distress, but she's more than that. She's like an anti-damsel in distress in a way, because
she's very much, she makes me think of Sansa Stark in Game of Thrones, who's like this very meek girl who's like, people assume there's like nothing to her, but she's cunning and uses that to like make people assume low of her, so she can like gain an advantage over them.
Exactly, and
it's a bit like that.
The Second Doctor is like Littlefinger, except a bit less creepy.
Yeah, he doesn't like want to like molest her or anything.
No. But yeah, I love that bit where she's where the Doctor tells her to pretend to cry, and the Ice Warriors would just believe it. And it's great. And so they can have a conversation. It's fantastic.
Or like in Tomb of the Cybermen, when like she screams and that distracts Captain, and then Captain Hopper takes a gun. It's like really great, and I just love that dynamic where like she's this like she just doesn't have a father anymore, and like they're the only family she has, and like they're very protective of her. And
actually,
it adds...
interesting that you call Victoria Sansa Stark, because I feel like you could maybe make an argument that Zoe is like Arya Stark.
I can see that, yeah.
Like, sort of like tomboyish and quite, you know, beyond her age and quite smart. You know?
Yeah, I can see that comparison. Yeah, it adds a nice like underlying character conflict to it, and it just is really nice and pleasant, and I just love the second Doctor's era so much.
Oh, yes. Well, it's funny you speak of companions, because my best choice is... This was a choice made by the production team. It was keeping the character of Jamie McCrimmon around after the Highlanders.
Yeah, I'm down for that. Yeah, because I love Jamie. He's one of my favorites.
Yes, because basically, Jamie was just meant to be a one-off side character in the Highlanders, and honestly, he doesn't even do that much in that story. He's very one-note. But then the producers at the time thought, wouldn't it be cool to have like a Scottish Highlander aboard the TARDIS? And he ended up staying all the way until the War Games. And he ends up being one of the most popular and well-loved companions that has some of the best chemistry with the Doctor. So it was lightning in a bottle decision they made there, having not even known what was going to happen, but it just worked so well. I can't imagine the second Doctor's era without him. I feel like it would be worse off.
Yeah, it's such a... Like, whenever the second Doctor turns up without Jamie, it just feels wrong.
Well, I mean...
like in the three...
Yeah, I mean, the only stories that he isn't with him is, like, you've got Power of the Daleks, but I feel like him being without Jamie in that actually works really well, because he's...
Oh, yeah, that's the one exception.
Because he's not as fun, if that makes sense. Well, he's funny.
He's not fully formed yet.
He's funny, but he's funny in a way that's actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
Whereas once Jamie turns up, he starts to mellow and, you know, sort of be a bit more honest, but to an extent. But I feel like that works with Power, but then you get like 3 Doctors and 5 Doctors. And to be fair, Jamie is in that for like 1 second, but I wouldn't count that. But like, I think 3 Doctors just about gets away with it just because it's so laser focused on his dynamic with the 3rd Doctor.
Yeah.
But because Jamie's in most of his era, it is weird to see the second Doctor without him. But I think, yeah, that knee-jerk decision to be like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Jamie was a companion, was great. It was a fantastic decision made, I think. And I can't imagine anyone else being in that position.
I agree with that. It's funny, because my worst point, it was so hard to pick a worst point, because there's no real major, like, long-running creative decision that I have a bone to pick with in the Troughton era. But this is the one weakest element, and it does kind of go hand in hand with that. 3 companions in season 4.
Oh, yeah.
It is a bit much, just a bit. And it's not something that, like, takes away too much from the stories. Like, some stories like the Macra Terror balance them all really well, but, like, it does feel just a bit overcrowded in some of those stories.
Yeah, well, I mean...
like the Underwater Menace.
Well, in the Highlanders, Jamie isn't really a companion, he's just there, so that's fine. But then you got Underwater Menace, where it's so bizarre, because it feels like there's that scene where Jamie's about to fall, and it feels like Ben is saving another person that's exactly like him. Like, Ben and Jamie are, like, conjoined twins in that story. And
then the moon base, Jamie had to be hastily written into that.
Yeah. Well, in each one of that story, like, I think it's like Underwater Menace, Polly has to go under the knife, then Jamie in the moon base gets knocked out, and then Ben becomes evil in the Macra Terror.
And then the faceless ones are just kind of, they just go.
Ben and Polly get written out for a bit. But I think that's... I can excuse that because Samantha Briggs is great.
Yeah, so, like, it is, again, it's not something that genuinely irks me. Like, I'm still fine with that, but I had to pick a worse decision, and that just kind of had to be it, really.
Yeah. My worst one is a very superficial thing, but it does affect the whole era. It's the fact that they shrunk the TARDIS set.
Yeah, I can see that. I do kind of miss how homely it was in Hartnell's run.
Because I loved how huge the Hartnell one was, and then in the Troughton era, it's just this little, like, console room.
In like Enemy of the World, Web of Fear, and like Tomb of the Cybermen, it seems like really spacious and it's cool there. But then, and in the war games, but like in something like the Seeds of Death, it's like really boxed in and yeah, there's like no space.
Well, they just don't go to any other rooms, I think, from memory.
You almost don't visit the TARDIS console room that much in some stories.
Yeah.
Like some stories just end with them filing into the TARDIS and then the credits roll. Like it's a bit.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't until like Tom or especially Davison that the TARDIS really came back to its prime again. Because like with Tom, I think it's more so just like the fact that they changed consoles in season 14. They just had a big walk around. That was fun. But it's mainly for me. I think some of the camera shots in the Williams era actually really show off the TARDIS really well. But it's more so once you get to the 80s and they bring on the wooden trio and they actually show like bedrooms and stuff, that it starts to feel like a home again. Although, to be fair, this degrades once you get to McCoy, because McCoy barely ever has the TARDIS at all. Like, it's weird. There's hardly any scenes in the McCoy era that are actually in the TARDIS.
And whenever there are, it just throws you off a bit. Like, oh, what's this?
Yeah, but then, of course, basically from McGann onwards, the TARDIS became this huge attraction again, which was great. Until I would say maybe in Chibnall's era, it's become a bit too dank. And I'm like, ah...
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Pertwee. Do you want to start Pertwee?
All right.
Then we can
Yes. Okay, so my best one for Pertwee is a bit of it's sort of like two decisions that were made over the course of it. But basically, to sum it up, my best is reinventing the show as a gritty Earth-based sci-fi political drama, and then subsequently phasing back in the TARDIS adventures before it got stale.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so yeah, so like basically because season 7 was so different to the 60s, it created a whole new identity for the show. But then right around sort of season 9-ish, before that became repetitive, they brought back the TARDIS adventures, stuff like, Curse of Peladon, and I think the Mutants is in another planet, is it? I could be wrong on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course in season 10 especially, that's when you really get it with Carnival of Monsters, Frontier in Space, and Planet of the Daleks. Like, that's when the Pertwee era starts to feel like Old Who again. Like it feels like the sort of the magical adventures. I like that the Pertwee era is sort of separated into halves in that regard, and that there's the really gritty side of it, but then there's also later on you get a lot more adventures, and I feel like it really helps give his era a good variety. The only thing that they missed out on is historicals, which they only had like 1 or 2 of. But,
yeah, that's true.
I think reinventing the show as an Earth drama was great at the start, and then also the fact that they didn't let it go stale. I think that was a really good move.
Mine is the rivalry between the Doctor and the Master.
Oh, yes.
Because we have the Doctor, we have this Earthbound Doctor who's like really frustrated at his situation, and then you've just got this teasing prick from his own race just going, ha 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 ha, I can go wherever I want and I'm just gonna fuck shit up around you. And I think that's all I need to say about it, really. Like, he just creates this endearing dynamic for like the Earthbound formula that does sort of bleed over into that space adventure era, because he's still in like Frontier in Space and stuff. And it's just, that rivalry is just really nice, and it helps. It's cool that the Doctor and Jo can. It's cool watching like their development alongside the Master, like over time. Because when Jo first meets him, she's like quite dithery and meek, but then like the last time she meets the Master, she's like very, like defiant against him, and it's cool seeing that development over time.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, because the Roger Delgado Master only ever appeared with Jo Grant. So they have a very direct connection. Yeah,
I think they probably have the best master-companion relationship. So I can't think of any... Because like someone like, say, Nyssa and the Ainley Master, they have nothing, even though like in concept, like he stole her dad's body. There should be like so much there, but there's nothing.
I was just about to say, thinking about it, Sarah Jane never met the Master, but then I forgot the 5 Doctors happened. Was Sarah Jane in the room when the Master was there? I can't actually remember.
They pulled up in the car, Like the master was like, "Doctor, wait!" And then Sarah was like, "Doctor,
yeah.
who is that?" He's like, "That's my best enemy. He likes to be near the master."
Of course, yeah. They made sure that people that hadn't met certain people met each other in that story. Like, didn't they have a scene where Pertwee met the Cybermen in that story?
Indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Bloody carrot sticks.
It's weird that Sarah Jane has like more of a rivalry with the Trickster than she does with the Master. Like, this is a weird thought.
Is the Trickster the one that played by Bradley Walsh?
Oh no, that's the clown.
Oh, that's the clown.
Day of the Clown.
Oh yeah, okay.
The Trickster's the one with no face.
I've yet to see like 99% of that show.
Oh, okay. Like,
it's like
so you know that 10th Doctor episode that
yeah.
the one. Okay, well, the villain in that, the Trickster, who's like a faceless thing. That's the Trickster.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, it's like one of the only corners of like Russell's era that I haven't really got to. It's like that and Children of Earth.
I think you'll like it.
Yeah.
Sarah Jane Adventures. But no, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. For me, the worst decision of the Pertwee era, I was struggling to think of one, but then something was brought up to me the other day by Oliver Bennett. And I actually really agree with this. Just imagine, because obviously, you know, the last time the Daleks appeared before the Pertwee era was evil, and it was meant to be their final end. Just imagine if the return of the Daleks had been in Frontier in Space rather than Day of the Daleks.
Yeah, he said that to me as well, and I was like, yeah that actually would have been cool.
That would have been awesome. Yeah, because I like Day of the Daleks, but I feel like you could have had a much more grandiose return for them. And also... And
they don't really have much of a presence in Day of the Daleks anyway.
I feel like you could have done a completely different villain in that.
Yeah. I agree with that.
If their return had been in Frontier in Space, and then, I don't know, make Planet a bit better. But yeah, if their return had been Frontier in Space, that would have been just the best way to bring them back. It would have been so cool.
I really agree with that.
Yeah.
My worst decision is the disposal of Liz Shaw and the Flanderization of the Brigadier and unit.
Right.
So, like, Liz just abruptly goes off screen, like, behind the scenes reasons, obviously, but, like, it just feels kind of lame. And then the Brigadier, like, he just loses... Because when the Brigadier starts out, he's more like... He's always been authoritarian, but, like, he was always, like, open-minded to start with, and you know, like... He was never like they introduced the stubbornness slowly, but then like by the time you reach season 9 and season 10, he is thick, especially in the Three Doctors. Like, oh my god, and like he's kind of has like no brain cells left in his head, and it's just like unit just kind of stopped being relevant. Like there are some stories like the Time Monster, like it's a fun meme, but like they're treated as a joke in that, or like the Sea Devils, where they're not even in that story, and it's another military service altogether.
Yeah, I've always said that the Sea Devils would be way better if the Brigadier was in it. Because imagine it being like a sequel to the Silurians, and them having to deal with the same conflict again. That would have been great. And then also the fact that UNIT is not well versed in the ocean, and they would have to be like, they would have to do what the Navy tells them to do, which would be a big like bollocking for the Brigadier.
Yeah, that would be cool. And like Planet of the Spiders, where they're just abandoned halfway through, and like
yeah, I think it just comes down to the fact that UNIT was created with the idea of them being very in a sort of gritty scenario, like the invasion, and then season 7. But then once Barry Letts turned the Pertwee era into this sort of cartoon, they changed.
Yeah, and they were just kind of left to be slowly phased out, and that's a bit of a shame. But, you know.
Yeah, I had mixed feelings on it, because I do agree that they're not as compelling, but I also, having said that, like, whilst the Brigadier does become less intelligent, I also find a lot of those jokes quite funny. Like, the fact that the Brigadier, after all this time, still didn't believe that the TARDIS was actually a thing that was that big on the inside, and then when he goes inside it, he was like, oh, fuck, it actually is. I do find that quite funny. But I get where you're coming from. I just think it might also be the fact that Nicholas Courtney can turn anything into gold.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
True that.
And also, I'm not sure if this necessarily, because this is not part of the Pertwee era, but I also really like the way that the Brigadier has to respond differently to the Fourth Doctor and Robot. I think he was a really good character to establish the new Doctor.
Yeah, he's like a bit colder towards the Fourth Doctor and more like eye rolling of the Fourth Doctor's antics, and that's a fun change of dynamic. Will
you please pay attention?
Oh, but I am Brigadier. Look, and it's a squash daffodil.
Yeah. One of my favourite fucking funny lines is when he's like, "Oh, Brigadier, you must show a sense of urgency." It's great. Anyway, we're getting carried away.
Speaking of the Fourth Doctor.
Yes. Yeah, you go first for best.
Leela. I love Leela. Because, like, she's, like, a very different kind of character. Like, because she comes from, like, it's a sort of, like, I just love the idea of her origin story. Like, she's from this primitive society who's been, like, thrown back in by Zoannon's influence, and like they're all very superstitious and all that stuff. But then you have like this one fish out of water character who like sees through all this bullshit. Like she's basically an atheist, and she's really intelligent. You know, she wants to get to the bottom of this, and she sees how like Zoannon is like causing harm to her tribe, and it's like cool having a character where they emphasize the fact that intelligence isn't dictated by environment per se. Like even if like some characteristics are like her warrior instincts, and you know that's cool. Like it's cool to have a character like that. Like it's quite an empowering message actually. Like hey, no matter where you grow up, you can still be really fucking smart, but also your background isn't a hindrance. Like because her warrior skills come in really handy.
Yeah.
Like in The Invisible Enemy. Like I don't think that's her best story, but like she like hunts in the Doctor's mind and of the moments where like she shanks someone in the back with like a Janus thorn and like also just even like there are some instances where the Doctor's like struggling to find a solution to a problem, and then Leela will like suggest something that he just didn't notice, and he'd be like, "Oh my god, Leela, that's great!" Like, there's that bit in Horror Fang Rock where the Doctor's like, "Oh, we need to destroy the Rutan ship with like a laser beam like fired through like a diamond or something," and then Leela's like, "Well, why don't we just use this lighthouse?" And he was like, "Leela, that's a beautiful notion."
I also love how Leela treats K9 like a real person.
Oh god, yes, like satisfactory, mistress. Yes, K9. What do you want? A biscuit?
Oh,
and she like
so good.
And she just sort of, because like the Fourth Doctor's always treated as like this arrogant, above it all like troll in a way, and he's not that. He definitely does have that, but like there's a few moments with Leela that sort of like humble him in a way, because as I said, like when she suggests something, he's like genuinely impressed by what she said. And it's like nice to have this character moments.
I think the only thing for me that really bugs me about Leela is the Invasion of Time. I hate
her
story.
exit's crap.
I hate that story. It's not just to do with the exit as well, it's the fact that they didn't capitalize on the fact that the Doctor is like lying to her and pretending to be, you know, against her, and then they never conclude that in a way. Like they just sort of been like, "Oh no, bygones be bygones. I was just tricking them." And there's no tension. Yeah. I wish there was tension. I'd be like, "Oh, it's such a missed opportunity."
Because Leela's like, no, I believe he has a plan. Like he's just like scheming something.
Imagine
like
how much better her exit would be if the reason for her leaving was the fact that she didn't trust him anymore, rather than, "Oh, I fell in love in 5 minutes."
Even if it was just like, "Oh, right, these outsiders, they're shit. I know, I'm going to train them." Like, even if you stayed behind for that would be so much better.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. Bottom line, I love Leela so much. Yeah, what's your one?
My best one is, it's kind of a bit like the Pertwee one, but in reverse. It's having the majority of the stories be on alien planets and having alien companions.
Ooh.
Yes.
The only
exception to this is season 13, because most of that takes place on Earth.
And that's the last season to really have unit, and it's like slowly phasing them out.
Yeah. Apart from, I think it's Planet of Evil and Brain of Morbius, they don't take place on Earth. And I suppose part of Pyramids of Mars, but it's technically an Earth story in a way. But apart from that, the Fourth Doctor era, it's, in contrast to the Pertwee era, it's almost all alien planets. There's more alien stories than there are Earth stories overall, I think, from memory. I know in season 16 there's only one, which is Stones of Blood, and even that, half the story takes place in fucking hyperspace.
It almost starts to make you miss Earth, like with how there's almost an embargo on going there.
Yeah, and
that's great.
Even the stories that are on Earth tend to be quite out there, apart from the 2 or 3 unit stories they have.
Yeah, because there's like whenever they're on Earth, there's like isolated settings, like Horrorfang Rock is in a lighthouse,
like
or
Seeds of Doom is like they go to Antarctica, you know?
Yeah, Stones of Blood, it's in like this Stonehenge ripoff, like
yeah. And like, isn't Image of the Fandal like a historical as well?
It's not, but it's like in this English priory.
Yeah,
like,
it feels like an alien planet, despite the fact that it's on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get stuff like City of Death, which takes place in France, you know, it's got lovely location work on it.
And even like season 18, like even though it's not my favourite, like is Logopolis the only time? Oh yeah, Brighton at the very start of the Leisure Hive, and then Logopolis.
Yeah, of course. But again, Logopolis, even then they go to an alien planet in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's still like this weird morose distance in the story's tone anyway, so it still feels like not right, not homely.
Yeah, the only stories that feel homely to me are like Robot and Terror the Zygons, because they actually have unit in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because even then, like, the android invasion is a bit like those stories, but because it takes place in this weird sort of like simulation, it's not like Extremis, but it's like a weird sort of take on Earth. It still doesn't feel like Earth, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, I endorse your positive very much.
It's also not just the stories; it's also the fact that they have alien companions like Leela and Romana, and Nissa,
and even Adrick. Yeah,
and Adrick too. I forgot about that. The only ones that are human are Sarah Jane and Tegan, I think, and Tegan's only in one story.
And Harry.
Oh, and Harry, yeah, of course.
And Leela is a human, but like she's not like a typical human.
Well, I'm talking about people from other planets mainly. But I think the most specific one is Romana, though, and she takes up like 3 seasons of his run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's pretty good.
Yeah, of course. And of course there's K9 too.
Oh yeah, speaking of which, that leads into my worst point for the Tom Baker era.
Mm-hmm. I think I know what this is.
The handling of K9.
Okay.
Oh, did you expect me to say season 18?
No, I thought you were going to say David Brierley.
Oh, him as well, yeah, God. I was talking to Matt of Universals. I love how I said of Universals, considering I'm one now. But like Matt of Universals about this. How they don't treat K9 as a character a lot of the time. They treat him as a tool, as just a thing that they use. And like there are like exceptions to this. Like I think season 16 is K9's peak, where he has the most character sass.
Apart from Power of Kroll, where he can't do anything because.
Oh yeah.
He just can't get
because he has the most personality. He has the most plot relevance. He even in the Pirate Planet, he has like this random beef with a robot parrot, and it's really great.
I love that.
But then, like season 15, he's not really as relevant. Like he's not even really in Image of the Fendal. And like season 17, they just treat him as a prop to like, oh, open that door, okay, master. And then season 18 is just his worst, where he's just a fact bank who gets his head knocked off all the time.
I think
yeah, they don't.
It is,
they just.
It's quite sad, but also quite good for the plot, not necessarily the character. That his last story, Warrior's Gate, he's completely useless. It's really sad.
Yeah.
because he just can't compute anything because he's like, I don't understand.
True.
Yeah.
Like there is still like an endearingness to his shittiness in a way, but like I do kind of wish they treated him better.
Yeah.
And like in some of
I think he's
audios,
I think he's quite funny in Creature from the Pit, actually. It's like the one exception with David Brierley where I actually find K9 quite funny.
Oh god, and Romana like is carrying him around a lot of the time. Every time I watch Creature from the Pit, I feel like there should be like a first-person shooting game with Romana carrying K9.
Yeah.
Like, that's a funny
I also love the bit in Androids of Tara where the Doctor leaves him in that little boat.
Oh yeah, that's great.
I think
Master,
with K9, it's whenever like the Doctor interacts with them, it's always the best. Like whenever there's a TARDIS scene, K9's great. Like whenever he's playing like checkers with them or something, that's all good.
I tweeted this the other day. Like whenever Tom Baker interacts with K9, I get like vibes of like when celebrities turn up on the Muppets. Like it's great.
Yeah. But I think it's just a production thing of it. He was so hard to handle that it's just hard to work him around with some of these stories. Like, literally, in his first story, he's an invisible enemy. You can't even show him going into the TARDIS. Because he just hits the bottom.
Yeah. He doesn't even, like, go inside the Doctor's head with Leela and the Doctor. Like, that's a missed opportunity.
Apparently, he's also a disaster in Sarah Jane Adventures on production set as well. Like, Elizabeth Sladen said he was really hard to work with. I think K9 is at his best as a character probably in School Reunion, to be honest. It's one of the very few examples of something done better in New Who than Classic Who, I think.
I would agree with that, honestly. Like, he is done pretty well there, and it's quite sad when he dies.
Yeah, it's also kind of, there's something really nice about how this more sort of humanized 10th Doctor sees K9. Like, he sees him a lot different to the 4th Doctor, you know? It's
because like even though Tom Baker's even though the 4th Doctor is nice to him, you can still kind of tell like Tom Baker's utter fucking hatred of the character is there.
It's like when you have a pet and like when they do like really annoying shit, you always yell at them and like get fucking pissed off at your pet like a cat or a dog. But then this is a scenario like with the 10th Doctor where it's like, well, what if your pet that passed away came back to life for a day, you know? It's like that, and they could do no wrong, you just love them because you're like, oh my god, I miss you so much. And actually, funnily enough, that actually really fits in well with like the themes of the story, because that's the one where the Doctor basically outlines that humans are like pets to him. You know, the fact that they
that's tugging at my heartstrings.
Because they have limited lifespan of like up to 100 years, and he has to live on. It's just like having a pet, you know?
Yeah.
God, I love Russell T Davies, man.
Yeah. That man is beautiful. What's your worst choice for Tom Baker's?
So it's mainly to do with the fact that because Tom Baker's character has quite a few phases, because he's got 7 seasons and he's under like 4 producers. For me, it's not having Tom's many different phases flow naturally like a character journey.
Yeah, there's some very abrupt cuts to just...
It just feels like each time there's a new producer and there's like a new script editor and a new vision that they go through each sort of season. Every time he changes as a character, it's very abrupt. And I think the biggest example of this is the shift from season 17 to season 18. I feel like it would be so much more powerful if at the start of season 18 you showed a transition period where... I think I've said this to many people before, but it's like, imagine if in the Leisure Hive, there's moments where he's set up to say, you know, sort of Douglas Adams-esque jokes like he does in season 17, but then he's just sort of, either he just can't get the joke out, he can't think of what to say, or he says it, but he says it with a lack of enthusiasm. I feel like that would have been a really good way to establish that this Doctor feels like he's about to die. He's losing his sense of humor.
he's past his prime or something.
Yeah. And seeing the 4th Doctor lose his sense of humor would actually be quite a compelling drama, I think. And then there's also the fact of like I find the 4th Doctor extremely fun to watch in the Williams era, but I also feel like they just sort of forget that it's actually meant to be a character. And he's just he just sort of becomes he just sort of becomes this really odd traveler, which is fine. I like that. but I feel like there should be some depth, you know?
Yeah, because there are actually quite a few. I mentioned this earlier, but the Fourth Doctor actually has quite a few humbling experiences, like up to the invisible enemy, where like Mask of Mandragora, he accidentally brought the Mandragora helix to Earth. Genesis of the Daleks, he has to destroy the Daleks. Face of Evil, he accidentally like caused like a society to regress and be under the control of an insane computer, like stuff like that. But then once you hit like the invisible enemy, it's like the Fourth Doctor forgets to have flaws. It's just a sudden jump. Someone once described it like maybe the invisible enemy gave him brain damage and he's just like suddenly jovial for no reason.
And again, like something like the Invasion of Time, I feel like there should be so much more drama that comes out of that.
Yeah, like I said this to someone, like he accidentally causes Sontarans to invade his home planet. You'd think there'd be some drama there, like, oh, I over-schemed too much and I just fucked up anyway. But nothing comes that. It's just like,
like a character like Romana, she will call out the Doctor on his shit, but it's usually played for laughs rather than drama. You know? Yeah. It's more like, oh, well, you didn't think this. Is like, well, you can't say that. You know, it's that sort of thing. And also, like, something like, because I fucking love the androids of Tara, but the way that him going off fishing causes the plot to happen is played for laughs. It's played for, oh, Doctor, you dumb shit. As opposed to, oh, fuck, I have put my friend in danger. What have I done? You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, next is...
I just feel like there should be more of a through line. Like, I love Tom. I love all his different phases that he goes through, so I'm fine with what they did with him anyway. But I just feel like if you really wanted to, like, cement his character across his run, you could just have a bit of more of a through line through all these different phases.
It could be more organic. Real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next is 5e.
Oh, yes.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So this is one that didn't really click with me until about a year ago, when I watched more of his TV stories and listened to some of his Big Finish. But I think the best decision they made was making the Doctor an affable person who lacks strengths of his prior selves, and they used that to create stories where he's put under pressure and has to put himself in danger to solve issues and save lives. So it's interesting how it's interesting how they talked before about Tom, like, sort of in the Williams era, how there's a lack of sort of consequences to his actions. Here, Davison, like, he's not as fun to watch as Tom, not even close, but as a person, because he doesn't have many strengths, there's a lot that falls apart around him, and that therefore he's put under a lot of pressure. So there's a lot of dramatic weight to his Doctor when they really nail it, and that's something I really like about it.
And that I have exactly the same point. So
yeah, it's like
we snapped it.
Yeah, I feel like that was the right move. I think making the Doctor a very, a character that's very vulnerable and very, criticized by his companions, and him taking the brunt of it, and then also him losing many times. He loses quite a bit in his era. Is interesting.
Yeah, Adrick's death, the Warriors of the Deep ending.
Yeah.
As crap as that story is, but
the fact that he just about gets away with resurrection, but it led to so many deaths,
And Tegan can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And
then of course it all boils over in caves when he finally does save someone, and it's like, but he has to kill himself to do it.
Yeah, we had the same point. Since we have the same point, I have to go to my worst. It's the Execution of Turlow.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Because I get the concept. I get the idea of, what if the Doctor had a companion who was working for the bad guy? Like, that's an idea. Everything in terms, except for Mark Strickton as an actor, he's great. He really does his best with the material he's given.
I also
everything about the execution.
I also really like the way Turlow looks, like his, like the fact that not only the sort of like the pale gingerness to him and sort of the enigmatic expression that he has, but also his clothing. He just looks odd, like stylistically.
Yeah, it's a bit of an oddball, like not a Tim Burton vibe to him, but you know what I mean.
Like
a weird,
sort of like, when you're at a function, there's that one person in the corner that you're like, I probably won't say hello to him.
He's a bit like he wouldn't be out of place in the Addams family, in a way, I guess. And but like everything to do with like how he's executed in the story, I don't like him. Like not even in a you're supposed to dislike him kind of way. I feel like his potential's just wasted. Like I know some people say he's done well in Mordred Undead. I disagree. I feel like he's just there. Like they do that thing of like, boy, if you want to leave, you have to kill the doctor. But it feels like Mordred Undead doesn't really care much about that. It focuses more on like the shenanigans with the two brigadiers. And then Enlightenment does the most with it. But then like all the other stories past that, when he's like actually a companion, his like snivelly, traitory cowardliness doesn't really come into play much. He's just kind of there.
There's that
at the
one
corner
bit
of the
in the Warriors of the Deep Part 1 cliffhanger. He says, "Face it, Tegan, he's drowned." But it's more like funny than dramatic.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Turlow in Frontios?
It's the one instance where he has a character beat like that, and Planet of Fire, I guess, and Enlightenment. But like, again, it's like it just feels like, well, we have nothing to do with this character. Let's just give him this. This going mad bit.
I always forget that he's in the Five Doctors.
Yeah, he's just in the TARDIS with Susan for like half the story.
Yeah, no, like when people say like, "Oh, who's in the Five Doctors?" Like he's the last person I would remember.
I try and think of Turlow's journey in the Five Doctors. Like, he's on the Ivor Ryan.
Like, that fucking
he's in the TARDIS.
That shitty Dalek is more memorable than Turlow.
That Yeti is more memorable than Turlow.
Fucking Zoe in that weird dress is more memorable.
The guy who shoots the Castellan and says he was armed and tried to escape is more memorable than Turlow.
Yeah, that deadly fucking minesweeper thing is more memorable.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, that's Turlow.
Yeah.
What's your worst choice for the Davison era?
It's giving him 3 inexperienced young actors to work with. Now, technically, this is something that happened at the end of the Tom Baker era, but I feel like I can count it as part of Davison.
Yeah, and it especially, like, it overwhelms Davison, whose the main attraction of his Doctor is that he's not a dominant screen presence, and so to have him try and overwhelm these two, like, kind of poor actors, these 3 kind of poor actors is like,
Well, it's like, because Tegan's, like, you know, fucking smacking him in the face all the time, metaphorically, not literally. It's not like Clara. And then Adrick is just being like, "No, but Doctor, I don't agree with you." And he's just like, but Adrick, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. No. And then Nyssa is just there. And
yeah, she kind of just teapots.
And I feel like this, you know, maybe if you know, the actors are more experienced, it may work a bit better. But like, I mean, like literally, like Castrovelva, I've only watched it once, but the worst thing about it is the fact that because the 5th Doctor's knocked out, you have to hang around Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton being really wooden, and it's just so hard to watch.
You say it could work better with stronger actors, but have you considered Yaz?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose you'd have to like have less companions, but
yeah.
Yeah. Although on that front, we did talk about one of the strongest things about the first Doctor era was the TARDIS team.
Yeah, but like what works in the 60s doesn't necessarily work for the 80s.
Yeah, the 80s.
Isn't it?
The 80s doesn't have like 6 and 7 parters.
I want to know something funny. Johnny Byrne, who wrote Keeper of Traken, created Nyssa, and he was, when John Nathan Turner was like, "Yeah, I want Nyssa as a companion," rights were paid to Johnny Byrne for every episode that Nyssa was in.
Wow.
And they did fuck with her. What was the point?
Yeah, she's much better in Big Finish.
Agreed, yeah.
And she's also better when she's playing Leela in Arc of Infinity.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Nyssa is like, I mean, I suppose she gets that little thing to do in Black Orchid, but like she's just nothing. And then Tegan Tegan's best stuff is... I mean, she's quite funny in Legopolis, but she feels very out of place. And then her best stuff is in Season 20 and Season 21, not 19.
I say Kinder, Snake Dance, and Resurrection of the Daleks are her strongest stories.
True. Yeah, Kinder, but again, like, that's not really, like, Tegan, that's Thamara.
Yeah, true.
But I think, yeah, consistently speaking, I feel like it's, like, sort of Enlightenment onwards that I feel like Tegan really gets good.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, consistently speaking. I know she's good in Snake Dance, but again, it's different. And then, you know, Adrick, like... Adrick's a weird one because I don't mind his introduction in Season 18. It's just that when you get to Season 19, his dynamic with the Fifth Doctor is really off-putting. And then it's not really until Earthshock that they really get it right.
I think the thing with Adrick was, like, they were trying to have him be like... this little hoodlum. Okay, he's not really hoodlum, but like he's taught by this mentorish doctor. But then when you swap that doctor out for like a doctor whose main flaw is the fact that he has no screen presence, and then Adrick becomes rebellious, that kind of throws that dynamic off, and it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, also again, like the inexperienced young actors don't help either. The fact that it's crowded with, you know, very wooden young actors that don't really know what they're doing, especially coming off, you know, Lala Ward and Mary Tam and all that. You know, they had so much charm, whereas these people just don't. Oh, and also, I should probably touch on the fact that Nyssa is a character where her father's body was stolen by the Master, and they didn't really do anything with that.
You mentioned that earlier, like, such a missed character. Like, they have one moment of that in, like, Legopolis, where, like, the Master gains her trust to put a bracelet on her, and then nothing ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. I haven't seen Time Flight, but I imagine it's not really done anything in that, and I've seen Castrovalva, and again, they don't do anything. It's just like, this girl's father's body is a corpse being carried around by this fucking evil dead man, you know?
Doctor's worst enemy as well. Like, you think that caused some conflict between her and the Doctor as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, you were best friends with him and he stole my dad's body, but no.
Yeah, I know. Missed opportunity. Colin Baker. So, I'm gonna say my best one first. If you don't mind. My best one is Eirich Sayward having the balls to make the show dark and nasty and give it a really engaging edge.
Snap. We have the same one.
Yeah, so Eirich Sayward is... I've said this before on Twitter, like, he's quite... some people would call him a mechanical writer. He's not a very... He's not soulful or heartfelt. He's not particularly, like, thematic, or... He doesn't have that sort of... He's basically, he's the complete opposite of Chris Bidmead. Because Chris Bidmead was, like, all about the themes and the science and, you know...
My themes.
Yeah, the themes. Whereas Eirich Sayward isn't about that. He's like... He's more of a realist. He's more like, everything that happens in the plot is what creates the tension for you. And so what he does is he makes Doctor Who a fucking dangerous show. Like, holy shit, so many people die in, like, horrible, nasty ways.
So many, like, conniving, greedy characters who backstab each other and, like, double act to really macabre and, or, like, in Revelation of the Daleks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, like, Revelation of the Daleks is full of horrible people. It's so dark and nasty that it makes the Sixth Doctor seem like a nice person.
Yeah.
You know?
That's probably, like, an intentional choice. Like, okay, we've just opened this era with the Doctor strangling his companion. How do we fix that? Let's make everyone else more, like, even less likable than him.
Yeah. Like, there's a DJ that makes commentary on, like, horrible situations. You've got a scientist that thinks that sleeping with his mother is better than sleeping with the woman that loves him. Then you've got the woman herself that she works with Davros to try and fall in love with a man, and then fucking stabs him with a needle. And then you got, like, a bounty hunter and his side thing. And then you've also got, like, these, like, really conniving, like, almost like really scummy politician people, and then you've got fucking Davros, who's the most evil he's ever been, and he's lying to everyone, and it's just, oh my god, this story makes me want to die, but I love it.
Like, even stories that weren't directly written by him, but like Vengeance on Varos or Attack of the Cybermen, like there's a lot of like unpleasant characters. Even if they are technically doing good, they're still unpleasant.
Yeah, and then you get a story like Mind Warp, which just makes you feel disgusting inside. You know, it's just so grotty. And you got the Doctor who's been brainwashed, and Perry's in such a really stressful scenario because now she's like being treated like a slave and under the Doctor, like having to serve the Doctor and be punished by him, and ends up being killed. And obviously she's brought back an ultimate foe, but we won't talk about that. But it's just, I just found, like, because I remember when I did my rewatch, I had recently come off doing a bit of a binge with my friends of the Stephen Moffat era, and I was just getting so sick of the, like, oh, death is just, you know, it's an imaginary thing, and everyone lives, and it's all about love and tears and hope and children, and I got so sick of seeing that, and it was so refreshing to step into the Colin Baker era and just see some really nasty, dark shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Which Series 8 pretends to try and do, but doesn't.
It's like, well, Series 8's like, it's kind of like if Bidmead and Eirich Saywood had a conversation. It's like, rather than like being like, death is the plot, it's like, death is the themes. Yeah. But I just find that Eirich Saywood's writing style makes the era feel it's very engaging because it feels like anyone could die at any second, and there's so much violence that I take the show quite seriously in the Colin Baker era because of how much violence there is. Like, it's very gruesome, and it's not. And also, I don't mean this in a bloodthirsty way. Like, I mean this in the sense that there's so much dramatic tension in Eirich Saywood's scripts because of that. He's very good at building it. He's a very logical writer. What's your worst for the Colin Baker era?
My worst for the Colin Baker era. I don't know, because I just thought of one as I was talking to you, but like the one I have written down here is the Valeyard.
Oh yeah.
I think he's just a trash. Aside from Michael Jason, who is a spectacular scenery-chewing actor, the Valeyard is a shit character who's redundant and just his motivations just don't make any sense.
Yeah, the Valeyard's
and I know
like,
this just...
it's kind of like Classic Who's equivalent to like someone like the War Doctor or the Fugitive Doctor, you know?
Yeah, like a secret dark doctor, and what if the Doctor was evil? Like, isn't that basically the point of the Master already? Like, why do we have this guy? And he's coming back to steal incarnations from his past? That's fucking...
Yeah, I think it just...
Whatever.
I think the biggest issue is that, unfortunately, we didn't get to see what Robert Holmes had in mind for him, because he obviously passed away during the writing of Trial of a Time Lord, and so everyone else had to scramble and sort of figure out what the hell this character was, and they couldn't find the answer. It's a really anticlimax to the story. Yeah,
it's lame. My other point, like, just thought of when I was talking to you, was like the overabundance on continuity references, but I think the Valeyard offends me more as a concept. It's like Colin Baker, it does bring back the Second Doctor, it does bring back fucking Telos for no reason and all this stuff, but like, it kind of feels like damage control for the Twin Dilemma. Like, oh shit, we're losing the audience. Let's throw in references.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I have to say.
My worst is kind of the same as yours. Not quite the same, but it's basically just every decision that was made after Robert Holmes passed away.
Yeah, like, just the ending of the Colin Baker era is handled so poorly.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about the Ultimate Foe Part 2, I'm also talking about, like, the fact that they fired Colin Baker for Season 24. Just so unceremoniously. And, like, again, like, I like that we got Sylvester McCoy instead, but I just find that whole situation of after Robert Holmes went away, the entire production team just fell apart. And, like, Eirich Saywood and Pip and Jane got in big shit, and, like, you know, Jane T was... And there's that whole thing with Chris Chibnall and his friends, like, shitting on the show, and it's just such an awful situation.
We talked about how in the previous stream that Pip and Jane Baker seem like this really sweet couple who just like they don't know any nasty thoughts or concepts in their head. So I'm just like picturing just like this horrible situation, like flames erupting in the BBC office, like this chaos, and they're just like they just walk up to Pip and Jane Baker in their like cute little fuzzy bubble, like, can you write the conclusion to this story, please?
Yeah, it's like if if during the Moffat era, like Stephen Moffat passed away like during the writing of a season, and they asked, I don't know, like Mark Gatiss to write the finale.
Hell yeah. Or Toby Whithouse, like someone really mediocre and like nondescript.
I like Toby Whithouse.
Okay, Steve Thompson. Thompson.
Okay, yeah, fuck that. But although to be fair, if it was Mark Gatiss, and like say for example Stephen Moffat passed away during series 9, and then like he did Heaven Sent, and that was like his fucking magnum opus, and then he died, and then Mark Gatiss was like told he had to finish off it with Hellbent, right? I just imagine like League of Gentlemen on Gallifrey. That'd be so fucking funny.
Hell yeah. So the 7th Doctor. I'll go first for this one.
I want to hear your best.
You don't mind?
I want to hear you compliment this era.
Do you know what? I'm going to give you my best and worst because they are both the same. The Cartmel master plan.
Ah, yes.
Because on one hand, it introduces mystery back to the show. When the show really needed it, it was becoming this over-the-top pantomime with no depth, and it needed something to reinvigorate it, to reintroduce a sense of mystery, to reintroduce like narrative drive to it. And the Cartmel master plan does that, and I like that. It's cool. At the same time, though, it gets so much. It gets like too much, and it starts feeling like homework a bit, or like it starts like detracting from my enjoyment when a story suddenly swerves, like Curse of Fenric is like, he's an off-screen nemesis I had, which you don't know about, and
well, it's a bit
now
like,
I'm scheming against.
It's a bit like in The Abominable Snowman with Padma Sambhavar, except like every story is like that, you know. Except in Abominable Snowman, it's very sort of, it's quite sort of just like, oh, I'm happy to see you again, friend. But then of course they have to come to blows over that, and that's, you know, an interesting bit of drama. But then with the 7th Doctor, it's like, it's much more over the top, isn't it?
Yeah, because like on one hand it adds a sense of enigmatic mystique to the show, and that's what it really needed. But at the same time, the fact that Seven is just constantly scheming, and like it feels like he doesn't have another thought in his head. All he's doing is scheming, and like it feels like that sense of adventure like fades, and he's just out there for just schemes in a way.
And like, as much as I love the Curse of Fenric, the one part of that story that makes me scratch my head a little bit is when he hints that he's got like these godly powers. Like, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, and it's like, it starts feeling like, it just starts feeling like unappealing in a way. Like, I think season 25 is the perfect balance. I've always stated how that's my Goldilocks zone for McCoy. So if they'd kept that, then that would have been swell. But, you know, the Carmel Master Plan is a double-edged sword as far as I'm concerned.
I'm very intrigued, but also hesitant to know what it would have been like if season 27 happened, because I feel like they would have gone even more into that, and it would have been, ooh. Like we may have gotten like Lungbarrow on TV, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd have been interested to see that.
Yeah.
You know, we got Search Out Space instead, and Dimensions in Time.
Oof. Yeah.
What is your best and worst?
Right. So my best is actually kind of half yours, but also one other thing. It's Andrew Cartmel bringing back more mystery to the character and using his relationship with Ace to do so.
Yeah, I I agree with that.
I think Ace is great for the 7th Doctor because she's so different from him in almost every way. There is this really stark contrast between the two characters. And using...
Yeah, she's youthful and rebellious and lashes out, and he's very contemplative and stuff. But, go on.
I think using the relationship between them to develop both characters is really good, and I think... Like, you obviously get the Ace trilogy in season 26, which is really good for her, and then using his manipulative side to do so is very interesting. Like, something like Ghostlight, where he takes her back to Perivale. And it's just... I just find that so interesting to see both a Doctor and a companion's character arcs intertwine like that. I think it's really interesting. It's one of the... I feel like this was some it had some inspiration for how they handled New Who, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. I can sort of see the templates for what Russell would do in
it's just, I think
some of the character dynamics.
McCoy is probably he's a lot more distant than the New Who Doctors, though. So it is handled a bit differently.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's probably... that's my favourite thing about it.
Like, imagine if 9 had... Imagine, like, a version of Father's Day where 9, like, takes Rose back to her dad's death, but against her will to test her or something.
Yeah, that's right, aren't you? Whereas what actually happens is a lot more sort of adorable. It's like, well, be careful what you ask for. And then everything turns to shit.
Nah, I'm gonna fuck up.
And everything turns to shit. He's like, I picked another stupid 8. And it's like the most... It's like, oh my god, what if soap opera was actually good?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
What is your worst for the era?
Rushing season 24 into production. They had like 3 months to do it. It's like, as much as I know a lot of people enjoy it because it's a chaotic mess, like it's just they should have had more time. And like, you got Andrew Hartnell who had to like get Time in the Rani done, and he wasn't allowed to edit any of it, and he hated it. And it's just, it's rushed. It's really rushed. I think season 24 could have been, like more along the lines of like a season 17, where it's just a sort of fun romp. But because it's so rushed, it's just not.
I enjoy Time in the Rani for like the car crash cataclysmic nature of the thing. Like, wow, they genuinely thought this was acceptable.
Yeah,
but then the rest is like...
I think season 24's appeal is sort of ironic, though. I feel like you could have made it unironically good, though, like if you had more time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's all there really is to say about that bloody season.
Yeah.
I didn't write anything down for the 8th Doctor because I was focusing more on Doctors with an era, and 8 doesn't really have one on TV. But if you have one, then you can.
Well, I'll run through quickly my ones for Paul McGann and John Hurt because I know you don't have the unnumbered ones as well. My best one for McGann is allowing his run on Big Finish with Charlie to be as experimental and risky as it was.
I agree with that, yeah.
Now, to be fair, there are some corners where they didn't capitalize on us, like when you got the Divergent Universe and you have stories like Creed of the Croman and the Twilight Kingdom. But apart from that, for the most part, the 8th Doctor era is very experimental, and that does turn out some mixed results, I find. But I respect that they went there. I respect that they took risks with this.
I do like how the 8th Doctor's era has its own evolution, like Tom Baker's era. Like, you have the Charlie era, which is very classic Who influenced, but very experimental. You've got, like, the Lucy Miller era, which is very, very Russell T Davies inspired. And then you've got, like, the Dark Eyes Doom Coalition, so on and stuff, which sort of takes a page from Moffat's book.
They call it, like, leather.
And
they call it the leather era.
And that evolution is fascinating, so...
Actually, and funny, we were talking about, because that was my negative with the Tom Baker era, is not really having a through line. I would actually say the opposite for McGann is this seems to be a through line with his era, and I really respect that. Unfortunately, there are a couple of areas where it's a little botched due to it's more down to just, usually I think where it falters, and actually, funnily enough, this transitions into my worst thing about the Eighth Doctor era, is that his run is often compromised in Big Finish based on what the TV show is doing. Because they had to rush the Divergent Universe due to the show coming back on TV. And then also, they had to try and cater too much, I think, a little bit to New Who with the Lucy era. Like, I like what I've heard of Lucy era so far, but I think they may have went a little bit too far, making it a bit New Who-esque. And then, of course, you have the fact that Dark Eyes had to be extended, and like you get all this other stuff because of what Stephen Moffat did at the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, I don't like that, like, because Dark Eyes was clearly, like, forging it in one direction, and, like, the end of the Lucy era was, like, trying to force 8 on this darker path to make it make sense for the continuity.
Yeah.
And then Night of the Doctor comes and is like, oh, nope, he doesn't want to do it. He's too nice for it. So then, like, all these other million box sets have to sort of, like, make him swerve away from that, and
yeah, I haven't actually, and to be fair, I haven't actually heard anything after, like, season 2 of Lucy era, but I'm aware of the sort of basic outline of where it goes, and it does feel a bit messy. And I think, again, this is the worst thing, is that Big Finish allowed the TV show to affect their, creative direction, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, I agree with that. Worst thing about the War Doctor is that he exists. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I'll say the worst first, I suppose, but the worst thing about the War Doctor for me is they retconned the Time War and they cut the edge off what happened with the character. Because what I loved about what Russell did was that he basically took that moment from Genesis of the Daleks where he says, "Do I have the right?" and basically said, "What if I pushed the Doctor to a point where he actually would do it? He actually would commit genocide." And then Stephen Moffat, because he's like, oh, the 50th anniversary needs to be a fairy tale. It's like, actually, no, it was all a misunderstanding. Gallifrey was never destroyed. We saved it because the children cried. And I'm like, no, stop that. And so that means that, like, this sort of period of time that the Doctor goes through around, like, 5 to 10 is disrupted by the fact that the War Doctor never actually did it. And it's a real shame. Because I think it was such a genius move to be like, the Doctor has the potential to get to the point where they do something that reprehensible and has so much regret for it. That's something I absolutely loved about what Russell did, and then it never happened. But
no, it turned out it had no consequences. The timey-wimey, untimied.
Yeah, and he basically uses the same ending from the Doctor Dances and does it in the 50th and retcons the Time War, and it's like, it wasn't this. It was a misunderstanding. Everybody lives. And I'm like, I understand that's your thing, Moffat, but please don't ruin the Time War with your thing.
Yeah, there's only so many times that everybody lives ending is endearing, and it stopped being endearing a long time ago.
I have a funny feeling that, like, I know that Russell says he didn't want to come back because he wanted to, like, let the show just be what it was when he left it. But I've also got a funny feeling that I also think that maybe there would have been a clash between him and Moffat about what to do. Because I know for a fact that Russell didn't like that decision, because he was in an interview where someone asked him about it, and he was a bit like, yeah, but it's not my show anymore. So, yeah. That's the worst thing about the War Doctor. The best thing, and I obviously, the obvious one to be saying is, like, cast John Hurt, but because we outruled that, the one that I chose was pairing him with Billie Piper on screen as a sort of doctor-companion relationship of the 50th. I think they have great chemistry, and it's one that I never thought would work. But it's like older in her 30s Billie Piper paired with John Hurt. Or maybe she's like in her late 20s at that point, I can't remember. But there's just something about how Billie Piper has developed and grown as an actress since she left the show as Rose. And she feels so different in the 50th as the moment. And I think she has excellent chemistry with John Hurt. So I thought that was a really good move.
Yeah, they have a nice bond. I can agree with that.
Yeah. Like the fact that,
that's the War Doctor.
As an actress, she can, match John Hurt's presence on screen, I think is quite impressive. Considering,
The interface, it's hot. Well, I do my best. I always remember that.
Yeah. Oh, Bad Wolf Girl, I could kiss you. What did you say? Bad wolf?
What's that? Hey, bad wolf! Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. Now we move back to the numbered doctors. I suppose you should go. What's your best thing for Chris Eccleston?
The grief that we were just talking about, like, as the worst element of the War Doctor, it retcons all of that. The best thing about the Ninth Doctor is that development, that arc, and I'm sure you will agree. Do you have that as your best?
It's not mine, but I do agree with you on it being one of the best.
Okay. I don't really know what to say about it because I think you could put it in better words than I ever could because you're the Russell T Davies stan.
Mm.
But, like, it's interesting watching Nine just develop and, like, slowly come out of his, like, hard shell of self-loathing and, like, having this teen chav help him. And you know, it's like, it's endearing and it's nice, like, so many character beats in his era, like facing off against a lone Dalek, or like the dinner scene with Margaret, or like his standoffishness with some of the characters like Jackie or Jack or Mickey or like Adam Mitchell, like, all great. And Father's Day as well, like, my entire planet died. Do you never think it never occurred to me to go back and save them? So many great moments. And an ever-evolving dynamic with Rose that's just brilliant. He just has a wonderful character arc, and I have no choice but to stan. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah. So I had a feeling you would put that, which is why I chose something else.
Oh.
So I have chosen showing how traveling with the Doctor has consequences.
I can side with that.
This is the first time in the show that we've seen what happens if a companion travels with the Doctor and their home life gets wrecked because of it. Most notably is when they return to Earth accidentally 1 year later in Aliens of London, and we see how that has affected the world, and especially with Mickey and Jackie. And this is also not just that, it's also how Rose as a person completely evolves and changes her attitude because of the Doctor, in some ways positive and in some ways negative, in the sense that yes, she grows a lot more confident and she finds a life that she loves doing, and she has a moment where she gets to meet her father again undead and, you know, come to terms with that. But also it makes her more reckless, and she doesn't necessarily realize the impact that she's having on her mother and her ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, it's all great.
And
great
that also continues a bit in the second series as well, but I'm specifically speaking about Eccleston. It's just so compelling to me to see that these adventures aren't just this wonderful fantasy, it's also has very real stakes and consequences to it. And I like the fact that Rose has to make a decision, and there is no way out of it. She has to hurt someone. Like, there's no all positive ending. It's like she either has to desert a man that is in so much grief after a war and really needs her, or she has to desert her home with her mother and one of her best friends and boyfriend, you know, that she's grown up with. I just love the fact that it puts her in a scenario where there's going to be consequences regardless of what decision she makes, and what decision the Doctor makes, and what decision the others make too. And it kind of puts her in a position where she ends up just sort of following her heart and becomes a bit reckless, which is really interesting and overlooked.
It helps that she's the first companion to really focus on her domestic life as well. Mm-hmm. So really make that hit home as well.
Yes.
Because if they did that with, say, Sarah Jane, like, I love Sarah Jane, but her domestic life was never the focus. So how could you really have that kind of storyline?
That's one thing I've always thought about, like something like when she goes back in the Hand of Fear and she goes off whistling. I'm like, but what about her family? We never met her. We never met her family. What did they think about how she went away for all this time? You know, that's a question that always was on my mind. But then once you get to the new series, this sort of thing is answered. It's like, well, what if we actually did answer these questions?
Yeah, that's true. That.
Yeah.
My worst for the Ninth Doctor, this was so hard. This is basically a nitpick. Mm-hmm. And you may even disagree. You may, like, find a way to argue against it and be like, well, actually, it was this. But that fight that Rose and Mickey have in Boomtown doesn't really come up again. That's it. They have a fight, fallout, and then like in Parting of the Ways, when she comes back, they kind of like, they don't really bring. I mean, granted, Rose is distraught about losing the Doctor. Well, she thinks losing the Doctor, but like, it doesn't feel like Mickey or Rose really talk over that night again. That's literally it. This is just a tiny nitpick. You may be able to argue.
Well, again, I think for me the reason why it works is that there's that scene in Boomtown, that line specifically where he says something along the lines of like, it's like, no matter what you do to me, I'm always going to come back. And then in the Parting of the Ways, like, that's the proof in the pudding. It's like, yeah, Mickey, despite the fact that he's trying to fix things, he can't help himself. And I think that's,
yeah,
it's not really focused on in Parting the Ways because there's bigger things at hand, but that small detail, I'm like, oh man, he just can't help himself. Like, I find that really sad. And that's what makes his exit in Age of Steel so powerful to me, is that he finally is like, you know what, I'm gonna leave now.
I knew you'd find a way to justify it, and I love that thing about you, where you're just able to make everything about Rusty Davies work.
Because it does. Not everything, but most of it.
And I told you I really, really had to reach as well. Like, yeah. This was so difficult.
My one's incredibly superficial. Because it's literally the only thing I can think of that would make Series 1 better. On the brink, and this is something that they probably couldn't even help either, but on the brink of TV becoming cinematic, they opted to have standard definition cameras.
True.
Yeah.
And especially since Torchwood was in HD, and so was Sarah Jane Adventures, right from day one. Mm-hmm. Doctor Who didn't go HD until Planet of the Fucking Dead.
Yes.
What were they thinking?
Now, if someone wants to be like, hang on a second, that's not in universe, because that's the only thing I could think of. The only other thing I could even think of is the fact that the end of the world contradicts the Ark.
I guess, yeah. And even then, so many Doctor Who stories contradict each other anyway, so like...
Yeah, like I would have, because I think a few years ago I would have said Adam Mitchell, but I've actually come to terms with Adam Mitchell. I actually think he's quite a good character. So, I don't fucking know what to say now. It's just...
Yeah.
The standard definition cameras give it this sort of... It has this dusty look to it. And I think the way that the show looked in, like, the waters of Mars and the End of Time is what would have worked even better for this era. I think
I can agree with that.
And also with the show and going forward, it would age better because it means that upscaling and like putting it onto new formats will be better, because standard definition doesn't age very well. And it's kind of one of those things of it's like the 2000s has this problem, because something like Spearhead from Space, which is in 1970, now looks better than the Davies era because it was shot on film and it's been upscaled, whereas a lot of the Davies era, and especially Series 1, because of how dusty it looks, it just doesn't upscale very well. And it's also another thing, again, it's not in universe, but like the Blu-rays, they fucked with the sound mixing, and like sometimes the music's too loud. And it's just, these are things that you could theoretically fix in post-production with the right technology. But as it stands, I just wish that it was shot in high definition, because I feel like if you made it look even more cinematic than it already is, it would just even more perfect it, you know?
Don't worry, someone will probably like go through every single frame of Series 1 and use Remini on it, or whatever it's called, like that software.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wish it was shot. I wish it was shot with those cameras that they had in 2009, because fucking hell, I love the way those episodes look with those cameras. Like, Waters of Mars is one of the best looking episodes of Doctor Who because they gave Graham Harper high definition. Yeah.
Hell yeah. You can see every follicle on David Tennant's sexy face.
Yeah, you can see every pixel of his teardrops in his angst. When he says, you know, today you die on Mars.
Like, you can tell all the individual hairs of his sideburns, like, yummy.
Yeah, you can see each drop of water dripping from the ceiling, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, like, it's not just, like, the pixels either, it's, like, the color grading, too, like, because of the high definition there, that story, and like also like the Smith era has really good color grading, which the Davies era has some of, but it's a lot harder to pull it off when it's standard definition. The only exception I can really think of that gets color grading really good is, there's a couple of exceptions. One of them is Tooth and Claw. That one gets really good color grading, but you look at stories in Series 1, like what's a good example? Like Rose and Father's Day and a couple of the others, the color grading on it's just too sparkly, and it's just yeah, that's all I could think of.
A mutual of ours on Twitter, Jimmy, did once say Series 1 is really brown.
It is very brown.
I can see where he's coming from with that.
Yeah.
But, you know, that does tie into the domestic setting of it, so, but
Jimmy is a very interesting person with very interesting opinions.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
So next, we're on to...
I don't know if I've ever met someone on Twitter that has conveniently different opinions to me like him. Like, he's just almost the complete
polar opposite.
Yeah, he's like, for him, like, Series 1, 3, and 4 are the weakest of New Who, whereas for me, they're the strongest.
Yeah, and he's a massive Series 9 stan, and
he loves
Series 8 stan, but
he loves Series 9, Series 12, and Series 7.
And until recently, didn't like Series 10 that much. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's like
interesting takes there.
He thinks Series 7's the best of Smith's era, and Series 5's the worst. And he's like Series 2 Tennant's great, but the rest of it's shit. And then like he doesn't like Donna that much, but he loves Clara. And
like these takes are alien to me.
Yeah.
But
and then he's like Smith's annoying in Series 5, but he's great in Series 6 and 7. I'm like, what is going on here?
It's kind of endearing in a way. Like, wow, you are opposite to me.
Yeah, and he loves he loves Dr. Witt in the Wardrobe and hates Human Nature Family of Blood. Like, you know. I just love that. I love that there's a person that is like that. Anyway, let's move on.
Next is Tennant.
Mm-hmm. What's your
Do you want me?
Yeah, you go first.
Kicking Rose out. I'm not just saying that because Rose is annoying. No, I think kicking Rose out is the inciting incident that really kicks the 10th Doctor's characterization into high gear, you know, with his rise and fall of a journey of like being at rock bottom when he meets Martha and like slowly climbing up there but still being a bit of a dick to her, but then like he gets a few humbling experiences, especially when she tells him to piss off and leaves, and then like he finally just realizes that he doesn't want a romantic connection, he just wants a mate, he just wants to mate, he just wants a mate, and
no mate with me, sunshine.
And then he finds a mate. I want a mate. Yeah, like he finally gets that that feeling of catharsis he's been yearning for after like the tragedy of losing Rose and stuff. But then it like crashes again when Donna loses her mind. It's more complex than that, but you know, I'm bad at words. And then like the specials where he's all alone and like despite having the biggest family on earth, as Sarah Jane put it, he's all alone for that period, and like he feels increasingly more and more isolated and dark and sad, and you know, that eventual build up to the end of his life. So like, yeah, I really like that the loss of Rose kind of kicks off that journey, because in Series 2, I have mentioned before, I think he's very static and happy-go-lucky, which, you know, is the point. He does need a place to fall from to have that drama. But, like, I'm glad we get rid of Rose so that can all happen.
Mine's a bit similar to you, actually. It's having the Doctor evolve each series and having the companion who appeared directly impact this journey. And you basically outlined a lot of it already.
Oh, yeah.
But I would also add that there's a lot of seeds planted in his first year. So I think Samuel Davis put it best in one of his videos about like how the 10th Doctor is the one out of all of them that would want to settle down. And there's scenes in Series 2 that directly target this. Like, you've got the bit, this is where, because you know, if you remember in series 1, there's the bit where Rose is like, oh, my mum's cooking, and the doctor's like, oh, we'll keep her on a simmer, you know, and he doesn't want to join for dinner.
Yeah.
Then you get the Christmas invasion where the doctor finally stays for dinner, you know, with the Tyler family.
Yeah, it's quite sweet
and
in that moment.
I like how this doctor just wants to settle down with a family and almost become human, but then of course it's revealed, like, over the course of his tenure, that that's not possible, and it breaks him. But I really like that, and also there's certain scenes in Series 2, like in School Reunion and The Impossible Planet, where they target this specific thing of, well, Doctor, like, you know, the adventures are great, and I love doing this with you, but, you know, do you think it's possible if me and you can settle down? And he says, well, no, this can't happen. You know, it says in, like, School Reunion, like, you know, humans wither and die. We already mentioned this before with Tom, comparing K9. But also, you get the bit in Impossible Planet where they've lost the TARDIS, and, you know, Rosa says, oh, you know, we're supposed to have to, you know, move into a house, and the Doctor's like, well, I'm not gonna fucking do that. That's not who I am. And I like how early on they make it very clear that he's incompatible with this life that he wants. And then, of course, through him losing Rose, he loses that connection to settling down with this family. And then, of course, you get the bit with Martha where he is going through this grief and doesn't really know what he wants, but he's also assumes that she's just there to be his friend, and then finds out that she's obviously into him, and that becomes complicated. And you obviously get Human Nature Family Blood, where all that happens, where it just kind of perfectly sums up why the 10th Doctor can never be in a romantic relationship with a human. And then, of course, like you said, the perfect time for Donna to come in and be his best friend, because that's what he needs. And settling down with that family, with Wilfred being, as, you know, there's that scene in the time where he says, you know, I'd be proud if you were my dad, you know? And it's just like, you could just tell this guy just wants a family, but he can't have it, because he's an alien with... And it makes sense why they went in this direction, because he's lost his people. He's lost his family, his real one. And so... naturally, he wants to find one, and he can never have it, and that's part of the tragedy. And I love how each series they use a new companion to evolve this character. With Rose at the start, sort of dangling a carrot of what could be to him, with Martha being the complex sort of in a battle, and then of course with Donna being the best friend that's taken away, and then the specials, like you said, with him being isolated and having to cope with his demons, and it all spirals out of control, and he burns up in a flame in his own hubris and dies, and is reborn as a man who can run away from all that and, you know, explore a fairy tale universe with Amelia Pond. But yeah, I really like how there's a new companion in each series, and that helps evolve his character. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I can side with that. My worst...
Go ahead.
Oh, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, just in contrast to that, my worst thing is... because I elaborated on things I like about this first year, but then also my worst thing is also to do with the first year as well. Because it kind of had to be. And that's that a good chunk of his first year in the role, which is Series 2, doesn't feature him enough. And that's... not necessarily at the fault of any individual episode, because for the most part, the way the individual episodes handle this is actually fine. The problem I have with it is that there's too many of them. And what I mean by that is that, obviously, in the Christmas Invasion, he's knocked out for most of it, and then wakes up at the end. And then in New Earth, he's possessed for most of it. And then in Tooth and Claw, he has to pretend to be someone else for most of it. And then Rise of the Cybermen is a story about Mickey and Rose, not the Doctor. And then Love and Monsters is a Dr. Light story, and then Fear Her, he's out of action for the second half. And then whilst he's in The Idiot's Lantern, it's crap. So...
yeah, like, I've thought about this a lot, like, Rise of the Cybermen is probably the least notable story for the 10th Doctor as a character. Like, not much happens for him in it, like, he's the least...
I would say the only thing that happens is at the very start and the very end with Mickey. That's all you get.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I see what you mean. Like, his first year is very, very slow burn for him. My worst for the Tennant era, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this because I think we've talked about this before, and how you've been like, well, actually, but it's the prophecies. I'm not a fan of the prophecy stories.
I knew you were going to say that.
It just comes. I feel like they feel a bit. I feel like they could have been done better. Like there's something on your back, or she is coming back, or he will knock 4 times, or the woman in the end of time. Like
I will adamantly defend the Face of Bow one though from series 3.
It does make sense because that is Captain Jack. So
yeah, the ones from series 4 though, I can see why you'd be a bit iffy on them because those ones are. I think series 4 and the specials is where it gets a little excessive, maybe.
Although it does amuse me how, like, Jack in the future, instead of just flat out saying, yo, the master is still out there, he just comes up with a convenient, like, an acronym for Yana.
Yeah. I think it's meant to be... shit, this is going to go on a tangent, isn't it? I can feel it. I can feel myself spending another 10 minutes talking about it. Basically, it's good. It's just good.
What have I done?
It's good and accept that I know what I'm talking about.
I will. I have the evidence to prove it. I'm sure you will DM me all of this later. But yeah, like in series 4, it just gets much. Like you could have done this in a more organic way. You know, like it just feels a bit weird, especially the woman in the end of time. Like,
the thing is that like. I can see why you'd not be happy with the idea of there being so many of them, but then at the same time, a lot of these prophecies, I really like the way they end when they actually come up. So I can forgive them a lot.
Yeah.
Like the Carmen from Planet of the Dead, you know, he will knock 4 times. It's a bit shoehorned, but then when we actually get the twist in End of Time that Wilfred was the one that knocked 4 times, I love it. So I'm fine with the foreshadowing.
The actual end results, they're great. It's like, but do the ends justify the means in a way?
Yeah.
And like the woman in the End of Time is probably the one I have the biggest bone to pick with because like she mostly just.
Are we talking about the Doctor's mum or the fortune teller?
Doctor's mum.
Right. Okay.
Like she feels like she kind of just, instead of just having Wilf naturally like be in the right place at the right time and like do things on his own initiative, like the woman turns up is like, the Doctor's final battle, he must be at arms, give him this gun. It feels like really like that could have been. I kind of wish Wilf had his more of a like incentive to do that on his own terms, if you know what I mean. But
yeah, I get what you're saying. It's one of those things where Russell wanted to leave a lot of it up to a sort of mystery, but I feel like this is an example where making it a bit more clear would actually help.
Probably, yeah. Who is this woman? Like, I know he says it's the Doctor's mum behind the scenes, but like, give us something in universe.
Yeah, I can see that.
But that's all I had to say about 10. That's the end of the video. There's nothing after the 10th Doctor. No, I'm kidding.
Right. I'll start with Smith.
Okay.
So my best thing about Smith is how at the start of his era, I repeat the start because this does unfortunately get undone once you get to series 7, but brushing the Time War to the side and focusing on escapist adventures is exactly what the show needed at the time. Now, having said that, I don't particularly enjoy it for the most part. Like, I'm not a big fan of the actual adventures themselves and all the characters, to be honest. However, the idea that Moffat was going for, where he was brushing it aside to focus more on this new sort of fairy tale thing, I like. I think that works really well to stop that baggage from interfering. And then, of course, they bring it back up again near the end of the Smith era, which changes that. But I think at first that was a good move.
Yeah, and like it is occasionally brought up, like Beast Below and the Doctor's wife, but like for the most part, it feels like the Doctor is finally free of that grief. It still comes up, like makes him feel sad occasionally, but like it feels like he's finally able to just be free of like his past baggage. But then series 7 just hammers home that message of like, no, your past will always come back to haunt you, and it's that's a shame. But
Yeah.
My best thing about the Smith era is also in series 5, and it's also one that is like a two-sided coin, but it's Amy's character arc in series 5. It's flawed because again she rapes him, and that was poorly handled. But like I do like the idea of having a companion who like she's about to get married, like also just the idea of like she met the Doctor as a kid, that kind of fucked up her life, and now he's and that's kind of like messed with her head, and now she's in like a serious relationship, a serious like monogamous relationship, but she's like feeling unsure about it, and then also her imaginary friend came back and it's like playing with her emotions some more, and she doesn't like she doesn't know what to do. She's just horny for this man who damaged her. And then he's like, no, Amy, you need to sort yourself out. And then like she finally realizes, she comes to her senses, and she's like, okay, you know what? I do love Rory. I do choose him, but I can still have the Doctor on the side, if you know what I mean. Like, I do like that. I'm not saying it's perfect, because there are some instances, like I said, the ending of Flesh and Stone. Like,
yeah, the entire of the Vampires of Venice. Ugh.
But like in concept, I'm down for it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I just I think the reason why I don't click with it as much is that Moffat has this tendency for character to be created out of like coincidence and like sort of just he's such a Hollywood writer because he loves misunderstanding, and that works really well for me in like something like Empty Child, Dr. Dances, and a lot of his Davies era stories. But then with here, it's all an accident because the Doctor was so, silly and didn't know what he was doing, and he accidentally time traveled too much, and that fucked up her life. Like, it's cool, but I don't know if that's really my sort of thing. I think, although having said that, it gets much worse later on when you get to like Clara, because when you get to something like Listen, where her accidentally traveling to Gallifrey causes the Doctor to become who he is, I think that's fucking awful.
It's bullshit. I hate that.
Yeah.
And also, Amy just kind of becomes a plot device later on. Like, she literally carries a mystery in her womb at one point.
Yeah.
And her character just fades.
Yeah.
But, we were talking about the positives, but, positives over now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just, again, there's just something about Moffat's writing where it's not as organic to me as other writers, then that just puts me off a bit. It's a bit too... He's too obsessed with time and how that messes up people's lives, and it just becomes excessive for me. When you use it across an entire series, it just sort of puts me off some areas of it. But I can see what you mean. Like, it is a cool idea to have a companion like this.
Yeah.
The worst thing for me, there's two things that I couldn't decide between it, because it's kind of both. I think I'll just sort of say both, because one of them, you don't really need to delve in deep into it. It's very simple. It's just over-sexualizing the show.
Yeah.
But I think the more substantive and more interesting one to go with is not having a plan. It never feels like he has
fair
a plan. I mean, I suppose he did plan where the Big Bang would be from the start, which is one thing, but the Smith era as a whole, all of the things that are set up in Series 5, they don't pay off. Like the silence and the Doctor's name and the Doctor's death and a lot of the things in his era, there's just no plan and there's never a satisfying conclusion to any of it, and it's really annoying.
Like, if they were their own standalone arcs that had nothing to do with each other, that would be fine. But the fact they're all meant to be part of this one big picture, because that's the fatal flaw of Moffat's writing style, is that he thinks it's best writing ever when everything connects. Every single thing links back into each other.
Yeah. And
in this case, it doesn't. It falls apart.
Yeah, because what I don't like
messy.
About each Smith finale like teases the next one, and I really don't like that approach. And I know Chris Chibnall started doing that as well, and that's really annoying. One of the reasons why the Davies finales are so much more compelling to me is they all feel conclusive, and each series that he writes it as if it's the last one, and therefore each time he does one, he builds on what he's already done and has another conclusion, and I find that way more interesting than just being like, ho, you may have thought this, but next year there's gonna be this. And I just don't think that's a good way to write a story, especially when each time that there was a finale, he's like, wait for the next one, wait for the next one. And then when we actually get to the real finale, which is Time of the Doctor, he doesn't answer any questions satisfyingly, and it's a massive disappointment.
Yeah, it's such a waste of an era. I wasted 4 years of my life watching that. Like, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I feel had.
What's your worst?
River Song. Hate her.
Yeah.
She's such a... Like, I know it's all the cliche, because I know, like, some fans of River, like, find these responses cliche, but, like, she's self-insert, she's annoying, she's... like, her introduction in Science in the Library just feels really egotistical on Moffat's part. Like, she comes in and she's like, wow, this is the Doctor, and he's not fully formed yet. He will only be fully formed when he knows who I am. Like, I will complete the Doctor Who experience. And, like, that keeps getting teased and teased and teased. And then, like, she's like, so...
I feel like a lot of that is...
the whole...
A lot of that's in hindsight as well, because at the time when that was the only story with her, because there was a lot of mystery around her, it felt more like it was played as the reason why she's saying that is because she hasn't met this Doctor before, and she's like, oh no, but this is not the Doctor that I know. Whereas now that we have the era and you look back at that story in hindsight, it's like what you say. It's like, oh no, this person doesn't have his... You know, he's not fully formed until he meets me, you know, and that it kind of taints it.
She even has that line, like, oh, you know when you see a photograph of someone you know, but it's from years before you knew them. It's like they're not finished. They're not done yet. It sounds so cocky and smug in hindsight.
Yeah.
Like, and, like, when we hit her actual storyline, it's just... Every single aspect about her character relates back to the Doctor. Like, in concept... I guess that feeds into, like, the commentary of how, oh, the Doctor's too powerful, but, like, that also just doesn't make her much of a compelling character at all. Like, it turns out she wanted to study archaeology because of him. It turns out she went to prison because of him. It turns out she murdered him. It turns out she was, like, indoctrinated in a cult because of him, like, indirectly. It turns out she was kidnapped as a baby because of him indirectly. And, like, the fact that every incident in her life just feeds back to his fuck-ups, basically. And yet she also feels like she's weirdly, like, leading him on and being, like, weirdly noncy around him. And I don't like their dynamic. It is multi-layered, but it's also gross and, like, unappealing, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like how Moffat feels the need to wrap the bow so tight on everything he does. It's just like, oh, everything has to be meant to happen, and, you know, all these characters have to be so intrinsically connected at every point in their life, and it's got to be this, you know, sickly sweet saccharine fairy tale that's really mawkish and like, oh,
why couldn't River just want to study archaeology, like, naturally, out of something unrelated reasons? But in Let's Kill Hitler, she's like, I'm doing it to find a good man, and she's clutching her diary, and it's, ugh. So cringe.
Yeah. And I again, that probably ties into what I said before about, like, over-sexualizing the show. Fucking hell.
Let's Kill Hitler is one of the worst things purely because of that. Just,
I hate that bit where she, like, kisses him and he has his eyes open. It's so awkward.
Or, like, there's close-up shots where, like, she gives that kiss that poisons him in Let's Kill Hitler, but, like, the shots are so intimate, and she's like, oh, I made this song.
I also don't think that Matt Smith fits her very well. Like, I feel like, David Tennant and Peter Capaldi both had a lot more, what's the word? Like, they had more of that...
Gravitas.
Gravitas and sort of masculine presence that bounces off her well, whereas with Matt Smith, he's a bit of a just... He's not that. The only episode where I feel like he feels like a fitting partner for her, and she's not even alive in it, is Name of the Doctor, but that's purely down to the fact that I don't know what the hell Matt Smith was, like, what Kool-Aid he was drinking, but for some reason in that episode, his performance is a lot more mature than it usually is.
Yeah. And also that's just a shift with River I don't like, because in Name of the Doctor, in Silence in the Library, even in Husbands of River Song, sort of, like, she's a lot more mature and, like, wizened. But then in most of the Matt Smith era, she's suddenly just this fucking hornball.
Yeah.
With, like, no sense of pathos. Like,
I just on a side note, I just find it so funny how for the most of Series 7, he's like this, there's rumors about how Matt Smith was, like, drinking at the time, and like he's just this like really silly caricature of the Doctor, and then suddenly in the finale the actor suddenly discovers how to play his Doctor again, like, really well, and I'm like, what the fuck happened? It's so out of nowhere. Like, you get Nightmare in Silver where he's awful, his acting is awful, and then suddenly he has all this like gravitas and like maturity and really powerful dramatic weight to his performance. I'm like, where the fuck did this come from?
Even in Day of the Doctor as well, but not so much Time. In Time is a bit bad.
Yeah.
Love from Gallifrey, boys. Yeah.
Yeah. But
so
no, it's crap. So do you want to give your best for Capaldi?
Just everything to do with Series 10's fresh start.
Mine's kind of the same. My one is stripping back the show of its baggage, and in Series 10 simplifying it into fun adventures.
Yeah, like, none of this over complex, because again, we talked about Moffat's obsession with making everything, like, feed into the thing, and that's one thing, it's probably the main thing I really hate about Series 9, is that if you don't like Clara, too fucking bad, because all of Series 9 is about Clara. The fucking hybrid storyline turns out to be about her, and then Hellbent goes back to save her, and Heaven Sent is about mourning her, and Face the Raven is about losing her, and like the Zygon inversion, like the whole pinnacle of that story feeds on the fact that, oh, I let Clara Oswald get into my head, and it's but then like with Series 10, it's like, okay, you don't want any of that over-connected stuff, you want fun adventures, okay? Fine, you'll have them, and we're gonna have this really likable, charming, down-to-earth companion who's like cheap and cheerful and not simple, because like she does have a bit of depth to her, but like she's not an overbearing be-all and end-all of the show. She's just this really nice person to help the Doctor out of this slump that he's in, basically. And you know, Bill's great. Bill's a great character. I love those stories they go on. I like, and it does eventually turn tragic in the end anyway, but like it doesn't feel like a overblown Shakespearean tragedy in a way that like Clara's journey was. It just it does genuinely hit hard.
Yeah, and I'd say that's to a small extent this is kind of to the detriment of Series 10, because I do feel like it's a bit underdeveloped, but at that point the fact that I could enjoy a Moffat series was something to be thankful for.
Oh yeah,
it's just very simplified, and it strips away all of the super complex elements that some people really like about the early Capaldi era, and I just find very off-putting because I don't like the way they're handled, and also the Smith era had a lot of that shit too. But with Series 10, it feels like it's not trying too hard, it's just being what it is, and I like that. I respect that. I think it makes it more enjoyable to watch for me, because I'm not having to deal with this really heavy stuff that I'm not invested in. It's more just, hey, let's go to this planet where there's these robots, or let's go to this, you know, the Thames where it's frozen and there's a fish under it, or a haunted house with bugs, or you know, a space station that's exploiting people with capitalism, and it's just really simple concepts, and you know, with a really fun TARDIS team, and it's more sort of it's more snuggly.
True that. So our point was the same, wasn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I'll say my worst one now.
Capaldi. Okay.
So technically this is only one episode, but I feel like I can tie this into other things too, because it's not just about one episode, it's about 10 years of the show. The worst thing about the Capaldi,
isn't it?
Well, it's not just Hellbent, but specifically it's using Gallifrey as a backdrop for the Doctor and Clara's drama.
Yeah. I agree there.
Like, I already wasn't a fan of the Doctor and Clara's drama, but then using something that had been built up for 10 years in the show, to something that at the end of the 50th anniversary, that Moffat himself was setting up to be this brilliant grand event of, this is where I'm going home. And then once he gets home, it's dropped to service the hybrid storyline, and it's just so disappointing. It's so disappointing to me for something that I was really looking forward to be then shit on and not used, and instead what we get is what we get. And I can't get my head around it. I mean, I know there are fans of Hellbent out there, and at some point I do want to have like a good sit down and talk with someone that really likes Hellbent. You know, I think I said on Twitter recently, like, Adam Martin would be a good one to talk about, because he seemed to be quite a peaceful person rather than a very passionate, toxic person. So I'd love to talk to him about it, but I just can't forgive
Recommend it.
I just can't forgive it. I can't forgive the fact that Gallifrey was shafted for this story. It's the worst thing for me that's ever happened in the show. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive it.
I certainly didn't. I was as passionately hateful to it as you are now when it first happened. Now I've just I've grown numb to it, but I still don't like it either.
Yeah.
My worst point is making Capaldi era really domestic focused and sidelining him. Because, like, I get it, Clara was bland in Series 7, and yeah, she was, but like, you've got Peter Capaldi as the Doctor. You're introducing this new, darker, more morally conflicted Doctor. Why don't we spend some time with him? But, like, let's actually. But they mostly sideline him for like Clara and Danny's relationship stuff, and then like, sure, that kind of impacts her relationship with the Doctor, but like, it's not really what I want. It's tedious, and like, I'd rather see how this cantankerous Doctor interacts in more far-flung and distant scenarios, rather than how some domestic misunderstandings is with his friendship with Clara. It's like, it doesn't feel very ambitious, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and there's also quite a few episodes in Series 8 that don't dive deep into it. They either just take the piss, like Robert of Sherwood, The Caretaker, or In the Forest of the Shite. And then there's also other ones where they do try to dive deep, but they don't actually do it. They just speculate on it. Like, Listen is very just like, oh, but what if I was a dark character, rather than being like, hey, here's the Doctor doing something that's actually really interesting. You know, it's all just so speculative, and again, like you said, it's overshadowed by Clara and Danny Pink.
Yeah, and the Ashilda thing, like, it's, yeah, it just feels like the 12th Doctor is tethered to, like, he's a really interesting character. He's lightning in a bottle, but he's got like a ball and chain around his ankle, like keeping him at the bottom of the ocean of mediocrity. Like, that's what the 12th Doctor feels like to me.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
There's a great Doctor trying to burst out, but it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. He gets a few gasps in when the tide goes out with Series 10. It's actually a really great analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, but then by the time he's met his friends on the beach, he's a woman. And he's someone else.
Speaking of which, we're on to Jo Day, actually. She actually invented Genesis of Androzani.
Oh no. The best thing for me about the Whittaker era is that they brought back permanent death.
I can side with that, yeah, because Grace is still dead. Like, she still comes back as ghosts and shit, but like, you know, it's not cop-out crap like Clara or like, you know, any of that. It's more of a
the thing is,
morose longing.
Whenever she appears, it's either like a vision of Graham's grief and imagination, or it's the Solitrack trying to manipulate him. It's not actually her. It's just a vision of her, which works much better, I think, than an actual resurrection. But Chris Chibnall brought back death into the show. Now, I don't particularly think that a lot of his death actually carries much weight, because his characters are bland as cardboard. But the fact that I can watch a story, and when a character dies, I actually believe that they're gonna stay dead, I think is good for the stakes of the show, because it's something that Stephen Moffat really fucked up for me.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
definitely.
It's like I had to really scratch and claw to find something that I genuinely really like about the Chibnall era, but that's one of them.
Do you want to talk about your worst? Because my best and worst are the same thing.
All right, I'll go for my worst. My worst, it's sort of four things that tie together for Chibnall. It is plagiarism, continuity, fan fiction, and dialogue. Those are the four things for me. I suppose dialogue is kind of a separate thing. I can probably pass that by because it's not really in universe. It's just part of my entertainment experience. The dialogue is just so awful. It's just the exposition and the wooden delivery and just all the like just standing in a line and be like, "Oh no way, Doctor!" And this is like, "What was name not actually? Oh." And just like shit like that. And all the comedy's really dry and not funny. But the main issue for me is the fact that he has this reliance on using things that he's already seen before, and not just other people's work, but he recycles his own work. Like you look at Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and like all the stuff with Captain Jack and John Hart is exactly the same as the Doctor and the Master in Spyfall Part 1. Like, you know the scene at the end of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang where John Hart like teases like whatever's going on with because I haven't actually seen to the end of that series anyway, but he teases like sort of the arc of the series. It's almost exactly like the Master and like the Timeless Child and like Gallifrey and all that. It's almost exactly the same. And
yeah.
Also,
and I've pointed out a million times before. Oh, I've pointed out a million times before how like Fragments does similar to like Can You Hear Me?
Yeah,
with his sudden backstory for characters who have been hanging around for 2 years.
Yeah, and he just throws in so many elements that have already been done before, just like in this mashed pile of nonsense. Like, you know, like in Series 12, there were so many elements of Series 3 that were reused, like the Chameleon Arch, the Jadoon, the plot of the Sound of Drums, the Master, even a Dalek hybrid in Resolution, and then you've got Captain Jack, and it's just... And there's so many like continuity references and just bait, and it's just it's just too much. And like the whole Timeless Child thing is so obviously ripped off of the Cartmel Master Plan and like Lung Barrow and stuff like that. But it's not done in the same way. It's not done with the same like mysterious effect. It's all just so flat and not interesting. I just think that to sum up all of these things that I have an issue with, whether it be plagiarism, fanfiction, continuity, and like the really wooden dialogue and characters, it just comes down to the fact that Chibnall doesn't have a creative bone in his body. Like he doesn't have any initiative to think of anything new, and he's a functional, like, not necessarily because a lot of his stories have like fucking incoherent plots, but what I mean is that he can churn out TV in a professional way, and on set and with his team, he has a very, very professional and sound working environment that people enjoy working for him. But the problem is that as a writer, he doesn't have any creativity, and it makes his stories either feel very unoriginal and very bland and very not interesting, or he steals elements before and mashes them together and tries to make them work without any of the things that actually, any of the substance that really made it connect, and his whole era just feels vapid and lifeless and meaningless. Yeah. I can't hear you. Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Go for your worst.
My best and worst are the same thing.
Okay.
The fam.
Oh, yes.
Like, because in concept, I really like them. There's a really good nugget of an idea in there, like like his a bereaving grandson, and like his grandmother's husband, who like they're not really like biologically related, but like they still have that link, and they're trying to find like a bond there. This like bubbly, enthusiastic doctor who's like trying to help smooth over the cracks. And this police officer Yaz, who just wants more of the universe. These there's a really strong idea of a dynamic there, and I can almost feel it sometimes. I can almost feel the potential, but it never comes through. It's just and I also like the fact they're thrown into circumstances, and there's a level of tension there, and the Ghost Monument. But again, in later entries, the Saranga Conundrum and some Orphan 55 and stuff, they're just hanging out, and there's no bond. It just feels wooden, and it's even hard for me to find the words because I don't know how to describe them. It's
really hard.
There's a nothing.
It's hard to articulate something that's really boring because you can't really find the words for it.
It's hard to what? Sorry.
It's hard to articulate something that's boring because you can't really find the words for it.
Yeah, I can't even call it bad. It's just nothing. It's just a nothing Bond. And it has potential in there, but it is never acted upon. Because, again, I like that dynamic. And there are some nuggets of ideas in there, because there is a bit in The Woman Who Fell to Earth when Yaz asks the doctor about her family, and then the doctor's like, yeah, I don't have them anymore, but, I always keep them, I make them a part of who I am, so when they're gone from the world, they're never gone from me. Nice moment, and it sort of harkens back to Tomb of the Cybermen in a way. But, there is some bond there, but then in most of the episodes, the connection isn't there, and they kind of make a point of that in Series 12. They're this is a flat team structure, but it feels unearned and wooden and forced and crap and ugh.
Yeah.
And when they split up in Revolution,
there is a lot of forced drama in the Chibnall era. I think probably the worst example of it is in the Timeless Children, where you got stuff like Graham telling Yaz that, "Oh, you're the most amazing woman I ever met," or you got Brian shooting a hoop at the Cybermen, and it's just is that your definition of what a character arc is, Chris Chibnall? Because that's pathetic.
Yeah, and in bits of Series 11, it's Ryan, my son, can we fist bump? And then Ryan's no, okay, we can now.
It's so just childish, isn't it? It's so childish.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I can see it's on paper this should work. But this in concept alone, it's only good in concept alone. In everything from the dialogue to the plotting to the structure, it doesn't work. Yeah. It's just flat.
Chibnall is in terms of writing, he's just so awful at execution. That's the main issue with him. It's execution and finding the substance and the meat and where the story is gonna tick. He's just not very good at it. He's just too... It's funny, because I talked before about Eric Sayward being a mechanical writer and how that helps create drama, whereas with Chibnall, it's he's just so mechanical that the drama never happens. And he's just so lacking.
Yeah. Because in concept, I like it, because, 12th Doctor, he's this... He has a lot of personal demons to deal with, and he's right, I want my next incarnation to be kind, and, with the 13th Doctor being this empathetic shoulder to cry on, and she has to look after this grieving family, and she's the life and soul of the party who has to elevate them. Yeah, in concept, that's a lovely idea, but in execution, it's just when they split up in Revolution of the Daleks, I feel nothing.
Yeah,
and yeah, that's my best and worst element of the Jodie era.
Yeah, because
it's best in the concept, it's worst in the execution.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, I just don't even like thinking about it. It's just so boring. Yeah.
Are you going to do Joe Martin's Doctor?
Yeah, I'm going to spend a few seconds on it because there's not much to say. The best thing about her is the costume, and the worst thing is the fact that she's used as a plot device for an arc.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, because I agree. I love the silhouette, the image of Joe Martin's Doctor, standing there, all powerful and badass with this awesome costume, and this just stoic look, and she's stripped away of that whimsicality, and she's a bit more sort of stern and I love that idea, but then she's not even a character. She's just this device to set up the Timeless Child arc, and it's like, why can't we just actually have her as a character? You know, why can't you actually develop her, not this fucking wank bullshit about the Doctor's past? You know. You get what I'm saying?
Similar to like what I said about the fam, like in concept, yeah, like in concept, this is really good, but then everything about the execution like flops.
Yeah.
Like Chibnall's Who would work as like a movie poster, and that alone, like, and that's like if the Jodie era was told solely through like movie posters, it would be like a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But then like everything about the execution is.
Well, I remember when the Series 11 like trailer came out, I was really excited because I'm like, this looks amazing, and then I watched it and I was like, ah, it's just nothing to this. It's just so bland.
What a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame to end on such a downer.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Tennant, Troughton, and Tom Baker some more.
Yeah. Right. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that video. Pretty much got to cut it off there because I got work in an hour. I hope you enjoyed doing that, Maddox.
I did enjoy doing it a lot, Connor. It's always fun to collab because you're very insightful, and I live for your Russell T Davies orgasming. I don't know, whatever you call it when you wax lyrical.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But no, Rose is such a bitch, and the Doctor's such a dick to Martha, and it's not good. It's just bad.
To think there's an alternate universe where you are like that.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks all for watching. Goodbye.
Toodles.